everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Nicole Forbes with Dennis's 70s, and hopefully you can tell by the display on the table today we are talking about backyard bouquets, or basically growing cut flowers or flowers for cutting. It's really kind of, it's an instinct for many of us to see a flower and want to pick it. Probably just one of those things since we've been kids, at least. Often we're told not to, or to ask permission. But when they're your own flowers, often you either hesitate to go out and cut them, not wanting to take all the flowers from the outside, or your experience may be that the bouquets have not, once you cut them, they don't last very long in the house, or you just don't know, again, how to care for them or what to do about having bouquets. Now, often we go to the farmer's market, in the before times, when we could go to the farmer's market, we would just swoon at these absolutely gorgeous, fresh, bundled, wild picked or fresh picked bouquets that are locally grown and are beautiful flowers to, enjoy for a week in your home in a vase. So it's clear that obviously we all love to have flowers in the house. Why we wouldn't be able to just dash out and put together a fun bouquet in our own, from our own backyards and from our own plants, is just again kind of changing your mindset and getting used to going out and picking things and looking at your plants with a slightly different viewpoint. When we talk about commercially grown bouquets, and of course coming into Mother's Day this weekend for those of you that are watching us live, commercially grown bouquets are often not locally sourced or not locally grown. Also, grown for a long, long ways away, which means they're not terribly sustainable and usually, again, mass produced. So being able to offer something local, homegrown, zero chemical usage or, minimal chemical usage as you would use at home, gives you the kind of peace of mind that your bouquet is not only good for you and your home, but also, good for the environment and for the world as well. So we are blessed right now and in forever by living in the Pacific Northwest. Here we have an amazing assortment of fresh cut flowers available to grow, and the variety that I was able to just in 15 minutes grab and bring together from assorted material here at the garden center is really kind of spans the gamut of both foliage and flowers of some of the best that you can ask for bouquets. Now, we have recently just gotten in a new shipment of roses, and boy, they are just starting to bloom. So I didn't bring a lot of roses in, or even any roses in today, because they're not quite yet in color, but we are at the peak of peony bloom season. And so our peonies are just starting to come out, and I have a peony stem that I cut from home, and then our Ito peony that I'm going to talk about. But the range of options that we have from, as I mentioned, peonies, roses, delphiniums, and then lilies in the summer, dahlias in the summer, late to autumn, just it goes on and on and on. Now, there's a couple of tricks and techniques that I learned by talking over kind of pro secrets with an event florist from 7th Stem, and they're a local florist company here. The idea of course, going out and gathering flowers for bouquets, the freshest, the coolest time of day is when you're going to have the best success. So going out in the early morning to cut your flowers is ideal. I know often I wait, and it's like a really great way to decompress at the end of the day, is to just wander around in my garden and pick a beautiful bouquet. But it's evening, it's usually hot out at that point, and my longevity has been compromised already by not choosing a cooler time of day at like morning to pick those flowers. Ideally, even you still want some dew on the plant, so they're just holding onto their moisture. They're that fresh, and that's going to make the bouquet last the longest. Also, going out to pick flowers or cut flowers for your bouquet, you aren't going to be making your arrangement all at the same time as you're harvesting or picking. Usually you're going to pick an assortment of flowers and foliage, and then go to maybe a workstation or your bistro or patio table, and then put kind of your flowers together into a vase or an arrangement. So ideally also have a bucket of water, 5-gallon bucket, or a pitcher of water that is lukewarm, so that as you're cutting your materials, before you bring them over and assemble them, they can go straight into water, again, keeping them as fresh as possible. Now, there is a handout that goes along with this video, and you'll see it just underneath the title of the video, so it will take you to a blog link. The handout is going to give you not only just long list of plants that are great for use in cut flowers and flower bouquet arranging, but also just some of these tips that I'm going to kind of run through right now on cutting in general. So one of the things that we learned from the pros is that the timing of cutting your bouquet, so early in the morning while the dew is still on, is great. But also the stage that the plant or flower was in when it was cut can also have a lot of impact on how well the flower performs and how long the bouquet lasts itself. So we focus again on, right now, the plants that are in bloom this time of year. I do have some dahlias that are blooming. They're just a little ahead of schedule, probably came out of a greenhouse, so you do see these guys here, but just to kind of quickly show what I've got on the table. Dahlias, both in bloom. This is a dark-leafed series of dahlias, so this is Karma Chocolate, and then we have another budded dahlia here that's a pink Karma Fox Maroon. Now, you may notice there's a hosta with this big, gorgeous hosta leaf in the middle of the table. Hosta foliage is great for cutting, but hostas are in the lily family, and they actually send up a flower stalk in summer that is really great as a cut flower. And this variety, which is called guacamole, again, one of my favorite food groups is guacamole food group, and this is a fabulous hosta named guacamole. It has like a pale lavender, almost white flower in the summer that is really nice and fragrant. So it also has that lily fragrance on a pretty long stem that is sturdy. So long, sturdy stems, that's certainly one of the things that we want to look for in our ideal candidates for flower arranging. We also want to focus on some fairly easy to grow plants and possibly repeat blooming, so that when we go out to cut one of the blooms, we don't feel like it's our one and only for the whole year, where we really have to make choices. Do I want to look at it, outside, or do I want to bring it in and have it inside? So the foliage that is often used in flower arranging is also almost as important as the blooms. So we want to look at contrasting or complementary foliage, shiny leaves, or different colors of foliage. So I've got a euonymus variety here. This beautiful, bold green and white is a really sharp contrast. If I were using some white flowers in my arrangement, this would be a gorgeous accent to really bring out white in my arrangement. So the euonymus is fun as a foliage contrast. I also have some things like the variegated twig dogwood, heavenly bamboo, and I even pulled together just an assortment of foliage options into, doesn't look like I finished my little bouquet arrangement here, but you get the idea. So ferns, so many ferns to choose from, and boy, we can grow ferns like nobody else can here in the Pacific Northwest. So ferns are always an option to add in a traditional bouquet. There's a lady fern or that really traditional spray of fern that's used in the bouquet as a nice lacy and airy kind of height and filler in the arrangement. You see here this really sweet, fun chartreuse leaf comes from our Mexican orange, a basic landscape shrub. This is Sundance Mexican orange. I just cut a couple of short stems for my short vases here, but also a really nice contrasting leaf, kind of shiny. And then close to fern in its airy, feathery foliage, adding height and filler without too much bulk. This is Heavenly Bamboo. This is the new growth of Moyer's Red Heavenly Bamboo, so it is gorgeous and red, but you know, really wonderfully airy in a bouquet too. So kind of take the place of fern if you have Heavenly Bamboo out in your garden. And in this little arrangement that I put together here, we see kind of how foliage is used to accent the flowers in a bouquet. So really, there are different styles, clearly, of bouquets, more, you know, kind of English cottage style, a very modern bouquet. There's like, you know, farmer's market style, which is just, you know, flowers, 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 kind of every color, which is wonderful. This is a little bit more of a simple, kind of elegant bouquet that is kind of highlighting just a couple of flowers and colors. So I absolutely love the Peruvian lily or Inca lily. This is Alstroemeria. And honestly, Alstroemeria is one of those flowers that you see in like the grocery store bouquets. It's in almost every commercial mixed bouquet in a variety of colors or kind of hues of reds and pinks and whites and violets. It's an incredibly long-lasting cut flower. So I have this gorgeous Alstroemeria bloom here and the very beginnings of some of my peony flowers that I cut at home. And foliage-wise, so this peony is going to bloom and kind of echo this gorgeous color of the Alstroemeria. Now, again, I'll talk about foliage in a minute, but you see close up the stage at which I've cut the peony flower. So the bud the primary bud that I'm interested in, you see the color of the petal now that it is cracked open beyond green. So we can actually see the color of the petal on the flower, which means now that this flower will be able to fully plump and open. So the bud is plumped, the color of the petal is showing. That is the earliest stage at which we would expect this flower to be able to complete its bloom cycle once it's been cut. The smaller two buds here that were victims of being kind of quickly nabbed in the morning here before I left for work, these two are not going to make it to flower. So these little flower buds are just going to be buds forever, decoration if anything, and they'll just dry up and wither, but this peony bloom will open. Now, a final note on peonies in general. This is a herbaceous peony, just a traditional peony. When I cut this stem, I had to bang the stem a couple of times on the side of my bucket, kind of on the outside of my bucket, to dislodge about 20 ants that were crawling around on this peony stem. So the ants that were on the peony were there because the flower bud, now this flower bud's not really sticky anymore, but the flower buds are usually oozing a little bit of a nectar that is sticky and sweet. And the nectar actually can somewhat glue the flower bud together and prevent it from actually opening all the way, unless you have some ants, helpers, who crawl along and lick and kind of eat off the sweet nectar to clean that flower bud and allow it to fully open. So like I said, it's not sticky anymore. Hopefully the ants have done their job before I picked it and knocked them off. But when you do pick your flowers for cuts, especially from your own yard, there are always the possibility that you will have a spider, some ants, other critters around. So it's not a bad idea to either kind of quickly submerge your flowers underwater or, just inspect them closely as you're doing your arrangements. And then even just let your bouquet sit for maybe another half hour or so on, like towel on the counter or something like that, just so that if something does drop off of the bouquet, you can kind of track it and keep it from, running loose in your house or moving your house plants or something like that. So now in addition to our peony and our alstroemeria, I've just thrown some fun foliage accents into this bouquet. So really a couple more ferns. We've got a tassel fern here and an autumn fern, which is a little bit of a different color to the foliage. Another really traditional bouquet element is salal. Salal is almost always in, again, those same classic bouquets with your ferns. And salal is one of our Northwest natives, so we can grow it better than anybody. In addition to the salal, a little twig dogwood, this variegated red twig dogwood, which gives us a variegated foliage, but it's more subtle than that really crisp white that we see on the euonymus. So just a simple arrangement that was, quick and easy to pick out of the garden. And really I picked just 2 stems of my flowers and some greenery, which gives me that beautiful pop of color in the house without sacrificing all the blooms that I had in my garden. Now you might also notice at the bottom of my vase, does that come through? So the bottom of my vase, you see my frog. So a frog actually, and in this case, it looks like a giant bed of nails. And I don't even have, because I've been pulling these out, I don't have all of the stems pushed into the frog right now. But the giant bed of nails on the bottom, or frog, is used in flower arranging to help keep plants upright and to insert the stem directly into a supportive structure. So this is a miniature frog, and this would be perfect for a small vase such as this one here. So the miniature frog, see if I can do it. Yes, right side up. So the miniature frog gets dropped into the vase, and then your little cuts get pushed. Probably doesn't really need it, but I'll cut a longer stem of something. So your little stems then get pushed into that pin structure, and those little pins hold it upright. Again, a narrow vase like this, and we may not have to worry about that. But my peony stem was kind of heavy, and it's going to just fall over in this vase unless I gave it something firm to stand up. So the peony is stuck into this frog down here to give it lots of support. Now, we don't sell frogs at Dennis 7Ds. They're something you probably have to find at florists. They are often quite expensive, and all of my frogs have come from estate sales and garage sales and things like that. So keep your eyes out, because a lot of people don't know what to do with them, or they're old-fashioned or whatever. I find them very handy. Now, when gathering materials, as I mentioned, the stage of the flower can make a big difference. So let's kind of go through that. This is, again, on your handout, but there's like a couple of different styles of blooms, and one would be spike style. So a spike style flower should be cut when like a quarter of the flowers on the stem have opened. Now that would be, as it says on our handout, salvia, snapdragons, veronica, but here in our examples that also includes delphinium. Foxglove is another spike style bloom. Now on foxglove here, if we look at this flower, and well, the whole plant, we've got our primary flower stalk, and we have approximately 25% of the flower stalk has bloomed out. So it will elongate and get longer as it keeps blooming. But we have about a quarter has already started to bloom. We could wait a little bit longer, and let a couple more of these flowers fully open because the stem may also get a little bit longer as well. Right now, if we cut this foxglove, we'd need to take a longer stem in order to give our vase something to hold it in before the flowers come out of the top. So looking down further on the plant, to cut a longer stem means that we would be cutting off future flower spikes here, here, if we cut that low. So ideally, in order to have the next bunch of flowers bloom on this foxglove, we're going to allow this stem to elongate more so that we have enough to cut to come out of our vase. So that would be one reason to wait on something like the foxglove here. And the same goes with our delphinium spike style. Now we have, this delphinium is again one of those gorgeous, this is Guardian Blue. It is going to get even taller in its flower spike. And these blooms have not yet quite even opened to show us color. So we're not ready to cut this flower spike. It's not yet even at that 25% of total bloom. Now, you may also see the secondary flower stalks here on the stem. So the same reason that we want to wait as we would on the foxglove is that we want these additional flower spikes to either remain on the plant as we cut this stalk, or we may have to sacrifice one in order to have a nice bouquet on this delphinium. Well, if we let that stalk get taller, these little flower secondary spikes should get out of the way. So spike style blooms when 25% of the spike has flowered. Now cluster flowers should be harvested when they are just opening. So too early and they never open, too late and they just fall apart and they don't last. Cluster styles, lilacs, or a cluster style of a spray of individual flowers. Roses that bloom in multiples on a stem would be a cluster style of bloom. Often geums are another cluster style bloom. Again, we want the flowers to be plump or else they won't fully open. Now, single stems such as dahlias, peonies, roses, we have one bloom on a stem or a flower bud, a secondary flower bud further down the stem at least. We want that flower to be plumped and show color on the petals before we cut it. And if it's too early and not showing color, not very likely that that flower bud's going to open. So on our dahlia here, a perfect example of a dahlia showing finally some color on the petals. That means that this would open if we cut it. But if we cut it all the way down here, we have two additional buds on the sides that will not open. So we might as well remove them and just have one nice stem of the dahlia. Otherwise, we'll just kind of, watch these sort of slowly either fade or dry up, or, nothing's going to happen to them, and they're not exactly decorative. So waiting to see that color plump before cutting is important. Peonies, as I showed you on my peony, dahlias, roses. Now, woody stems, back to the lilacs, hydrangeas, even this peony, and I'll talk about what this peony is so amazing for. Even this peony can kind of end up with some woody stems. So if you're cutting woody stems, it's also a good idea to take the fresh cut end of the woody stem and cut it across the fresh end. So on the end itself, make a cross or an X on the stem, and that opens up kind of the stem itself so that it can take up more water. Some people bash it, but I don't think that looks as pretty when you're looking at it through the vase. So just a cross cut on the stem. It is also best to cut your stems at a 45-degree angle or do your best. Don't get out a protractor or whatever, but do your best to cut at an angle that allows the stem, the kind of open end of the stem that takes up water to not sit flush on the bottom of the vase, but have sort of an ability to still take up water with more access to that surface area. It is also a good idea to change your vase water every couple of days. So every 2 to 3 days, dump out the old water, swish around some, just fresh water to clean it, and then replace your cut flowers by cutting another 1/4 inch off the bottom of those stems as you replace it into the water. And always pick off, so I've picked off and have little, wads of remnants of plant material that was going to be below the flower line or below the water line. So we want the stems below the water line, but we don't want leaves of the plant below the water line, or that starts to make your water even dirtier. Keeping your fresh cut flowers out of intense hot sun will also not only keep the flowers lasting longer. I mean, where does a florist keep the bouquets? They're in coolers, right? So keeping them in a cooler space and out of direct hot sun will keep them fresher. Also, sunlight on a clear vase can cause faster green algae buildup on the inside of the vase. So could even be in the matter of a couple of days with your cut flowers in there that you see the water turn kind of greeny. So out of direct sun, you have less chance that the water gets kind of funky like that as well. Now, also on the handout, you will see a homemade recipe for a flower food that could be added to the bouquet water just to extend the life of your bouquet. And so that would be into a quart of lukewarm water, you'd add a teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon of bleach, 2 teaspoons of lemon or lime juice. And the probably most important part of that whole recipe is the bleach. And again, the bleach is what keeps the water as clean as possible. As soon as you get some algae or slime or funk in the water, that starts to clog up the kind of vessels that pull up water inside the flower, and that begins to cause the flower to fade. Now, you will also, you'll read on the handout, but you may have also experienced, we're right at the tail end of spring bulb flowering season. All of the, daffodils and tulips, although there's still some really great tulips in bloom, at least in my garden. But we're coming to the end of that season, but daffodils and other plants that are related to daffodils, all in the narcissus family. If you cut a daffodil, not only do you notice, first off, their stem is hollow. So they have this really weird, not very strong, hollow stem. If you bend it once, it's bends over, and you have to recut it above the kind of crease that caused by the bend. So a hollow stem, it also oozes kind of a mucusy type fluid that is really unique to plants in the daffodil or narcissus family. So it has this viscous, clear fluid that comes out of the stems, and when you cut any flowers in the narcissus or daffodil family, that fluid that they release tends to go into the cut flower water and clog up the arteries or the vessels that take up water of other flowers in that vase. So really, daffodils are just best in their own vase. Leave daffodils alone, or pick all of the different types of narcissus and group them together and just have a mixed daffodil or narcissus bouquet. They won't foul their own water. It's just that when they start mixing daffodils and tulips, of course we want to put them together when they're blooming together in our yards, but they would be better in separate vases or in separate bouquets. Euphorbia is another really fun flower to use for backyard bouquets and harvesting. But euphorbia or spurge is another that tends to have a substance that it releases from the water or into the water that can kind of bother a lot of other cut things that are into the same vase. So now, even something such as this, I love this little flower arranging piece. It's in a kind of group of vases that are all that sweet little kind of milk or cream type container. And then they're all just set into a nice little wooden box here. We have these at the Lake Oswego store for sure. They're $35. But what this allows you to do is kind of either A, deconstruct a bouquet, or if you did want to put daffodils and tulips all down your table, for example, daffodils could be in separate containers from the tulips, and you could still have kind of an ensemble, but not start to compromise the length that the cuts are all going to last. Another thing I love about this small arranging tool is the way that many of our plants flower is often, again, they have shorter stems but lots of blooms. Or when I go out to pick bouquets in my garden, I might want to pick half a dozen flowers, not a dozen flowers, which means that I can make a smaller arrangement and a smaller bouquet that's just as lovely and fresh and beautiful, bringing life and color and inviting my garden into my house. But I don't have to always come up with some grand scheme, some elaborate arrangement, and fill a large vase. I mean, even this is not a large vase, but it takes an awful lot more to fill and make a nice looking arrangement in a vase this size than it does to do a tiny cream jar or mason jar, for example, that you might have at home. So think about those smaller vessels. I have vases, for days that sit and get dust, but I do love to just go out with a couple of mason jars in my fingers and pick bouquets that I fill together into a couple of different mason jars, and I can kind of sprinkle them throughout the house instead of having, again, one grand and elaborate bouquet on the dining room table or something like that. So, just again, food for thought when it comes to all of those opportunities to arrange and to bring things into the house. What have I got here that I've been kind of alluding to and looking around at? Well, as I mentioned, not only is it time for peonies to bloom, but at Dennis' 70s also, we have brought in a line of peonies called Itoh peonies, and that's I-T-O-H. And Itoh peonies are a cross between a tree peony and a herbaceous peony. So they're really more of a very sturdy bush. They hold their flowers up pretty well compared to the herbaceous ones that need cages and staking and that kind of thing. Their flowers are large and scrumptious. This one, of course, is kind of a semi-double, so we see that beautiful yellow center. They are loaded with flower buds. So, of course, this one is quite fully open, but we see a flower that's not yet open here, and several buds that have just cracked color, but not yet fully unfurled their petals. And about another 50 flower buds that are still green and haven't shown their flower petals at all. Now the foliage on this peony is also really beautiful. I'll hold it up a little bit so you can kind of see what great foliage it has. The colors range from this kind of coral pink. We have a yellow, there's a brighter pink and a softer pink as well. This variety here is called Takara, T-A-K-A-R-A. And really, height-wise, they're only going to get about 2.5, 3 feet tall and wide. So really just a stellar plant for early spring bloom or spring bloom like now. They do only flower once a year, but their foliage looks great in the garden through the rest of the season. Would also make a pretty addition to a cut flower arrangement, just the leaves. And peonies have kind of a traditionally pretty fall color before they fade as well. So it'll last until frost when the leaves start to turn colors and then it dies back.
Do you know what zone these peonies grow in?
Ito peony zones are USDA zone 4 to 8, so hardiness is negative 30 degrees. Peonies in general are pretty tough. I wasn't sure about the Ito, so thanks for asking. That's a great question. What else have I got here? So I've talked about dahlias. I've talked about some of my foliage that I have. And really, like, foliage is a give me. Whatever you have, you hopefully, again, will turn off the computer after this class or your pad and tablet. Go out and look at your garden. Take a survey of what you've looked past because it wasn't blooming, and try cutting it and seeing how well it lasts after you've brought it inside. Of course, cooler part of the day is better, but still experiment with cutting a few things in the garden and understanding whether they last well or fade away or drop their leaves or make a mess or anything. If we were doing, again, a cutting from this euonymus, just so I can show you what the stem cut is that I mean. So I would take a piece, obviously probably longer than this. I would remove some foliage from the portion that would be going under water in the vase. And then because this has a woodier stem and comes from more of a shrub, I'm going to do a cross cut into the stem itself. Oops. And the cross cut is as simple as cutting up the stem like an X or a cross. Oops, it's kind of a thin stem. And what that's done is it just opens up the layers on the stem to more, expose more cambium and allowing the plant to take up a little bit more water, since the wood tends to kind of close it up. So obviously another way to do that would be to just kind of pound that stem, but like I said, I don't think that's as pretty. And then we put this into our little, barely reaches the water. When we put this into our vase, then we've got clearance between where the leaf stops and where the stem would go into the water. And that little cross cut, which helps it take it up. I have Alstroemeria. I showed you here the plant that the piece came off of from my vase is this gorgeous little clump. Now, Alstroemeria, this is a variety that is a dwarf form. So some Alstroemeria can get up to 3 feet tall or more. These little dwarfs make a perfect cut flower in just their stem length. Really great for just kind of an average vase size. Now you see lots of flower buds still coming on the Alstroemeria, but they are a type of like tuber or bulb. And so one of the things that you need to know about Alstroemeria is that every stem that comes out of the ground comes from a structure like a bulb that's in the ground. Every stem that comes up is its own flowering stem that is a single time bloom and then can be removed to allow another stem to come up and be the next flower. So what that means is, rather than cutting it like you would deadhead many other plants, this flowering stem is, well, it's halfway done already, so I'm going to actually remove it. And we go way in to the plant, way down by the base of the soil, and we pull it out of the dirt like a carrot. So you can see that this white bleached part was actually below ground. And so now there's nothing remaining of the piece that I've just removed. But there are brand new pieces Like this is a brand new stalk coming up that's going to take its place and have a flower bud on it. Once this finished blooming, there would be no flower buds left on it and it won't regrow a flower bud. So of course, then we can just snip the bottom of this so that we have something a little bit sturdier to put into our vase, maybe clean from the dirt. And again, we have that nice 45-degree angle. And there's, a day's worth or 2-3 days worth of flowers, blooms still left on this. So we can add that to our vase. For just a little extra poof. So Alstroemeria, now again, just starting to bloom. Classic cut flower. This is lupin. We are also able to source some amazing flowers from England's breeders. This is the West Country terracotta cultivar from West Country lupin and in England. And the stems on this lupin are just as thick and sturdy as can be. So really great for cut flowers. Of course, we want to let this flower elongate just a little bit more and let these flowers fully open at 25% before we would cut this spike style and expect it to bloom. And always when looking at where you would be cutting on the plant, always take notice of whether or not you see secondary flower stalks, because here are 2 secondary spikes that will be our next bloom, as long as we don't accidentally cut them or have to cut them in order to cut the flower off. So letting that stalk elongate, letting those flowers bloom just a little bit more, will also save these secondary flowers for us for later. Salal, as I mentioned, red twig dogwood. This is the beautiful variegated red twig dogwood that's in my bouquet, but it drops its leaves in the winter and gives us winter bouquet material with just bare stems that are beautifully tinted in reds and crimsons, which really stand out again against evergreens in the winter. Ito peony. If you are a shade gardener, as I mentioned, hostas, fantastic for cut flowers, but astilbe are also a fabulous shade-loving perennial that gives us a nice long kind of cluster style flower, spike style flower to cut, and even some great foliage. So very ferny in its lacy texture. This would be a nice addition as foliage to a bouquet. But when astilbes are in bloom, of course, the flowers give us something to cut too. This is fennel, which is a red flower. Astilbe blooms are kind of a cool plume of like feather duster looking, and fennel is a real striking color, but they also come in violet, pink, white, etc. Another out of the shade section. Believe it or not, this is a terrestrial orchid, a ground orchid known as Blatilla. So I don't know if you can get a real good close-up of how gorgeous that flower is, but they are delicate and dainty. This is Blatilla striata alba variegata because we have a little stripy variegation on the leaf. But we've got several blooms open and several more still to bloom on this. A nice sturdy long stem kind of made for cutting, and these flowers which last quite a long time in bouquets. Couple of favorites for the sunny perennial garden. One that is just about to come into bloom, we have yarrow. Yarrow is also found in a lot of traditional bouquets. We've got this is the moonshine yarrow, so it has that fuzzy gray foliage. It'll have a yellow kind of flat-topped dome of flowers, but there's also green foliage yarrow that has brighter flowers of oranges and pinks and whites. Yarrow blooms through the summer, drought tolerant, repeat blooming, easy care, and phlox. PHLOX phlox is really, again, one of those like traditional cut flower plants. It has a lovely fragrance when you cut it. They last long in bouquets. They are a cluster style bloom, so you want to let that flower fully plump up before you cut them. This is David phlox, which is a beautiful white form that gets 3 to 3.5 feet tall or so. So again, phlox are good sized plants with lots of budding sites or lots of flower spike activity and opportunity. Two of my go-tos for filler in bouquets. And that's not always, filler isn't necessarily foliage, and it's not necessarily flowers. It's sort of somewhere in between. Florists often use a traditional filler that most of us are familiar with called baby's breath. This is baby's breath, the plant itself, and you can grow it in your own garden. I'll show you the flower and it might ring a bell. So the plant is again full sun or part shade, drought tolerant, long blooming, gets about 3 by 3 with these long airy spikes of delicate white flowers that are almost dried on the plant. So they last a long time because they're practically everlasting or preserved already. Gypsophila is the botanical name. The foliage is sort of, I don't know, low and grassy and not super impressive. And then it's just beginning to kind of elongate some spikes that will begin to show us the flowers here towards late spring, early summer. So Gypsophila or baby's breath, best in the sun or part sun. And then this is lady's mantle. Lady's mantle is Alchemilla mollis. This is one of my favorite perennials for kind of sun or shade, but it's going to bloom a little bit better in sun. Similar to the baby's breath, lady's mantle gives us these fine little delicate sprays of flowers, only instead of white, they're kind of an acid green or chartreuse in color. Long, kind of wiry stems are easy enough. You don't even need garden snips, to go out and pick them. And again, this is just a nice, airy, addition into a bouquet with maybe a more delicate flower like our little ground orchid, for example. So the lady's mantle only comes in this color of kind of greeny flower, but it is also a delicate and lovely leaf for the garden. So perennial wise, best in partial sun or shade, and makes a nice kind of low mound or clump in the garden, less than 2 feet tall, but about 2 feet wide over time. Any kind of water spray, raindrop, or mine happens to be just on the outside of my fountain, which kind of water splashes a little bit out of my fountain, and water holds on the foliage of lady's mantle and just sparkles like little diamonds. So the foliage looks best when it's wet, which in Oregon, because it rains here, that's great. Then it makes these gorgeous little sprays of flowers that are fun to add into bouquets, and it's super easy care and grows in, like I said, part sun or shade. Lady's mantle is really fun. And the name lady's mantle, just for kicks, is because this little leaf shape is supposedly reminiscent of like a Victorian lady's collar, that she wore, like the big ruff that went all around her neck and then showed her like crowned head out the top. So lady's mantle is, I always think like, super formal fashion antique ladies or whatever. Antique ladies, you know what I mean. So with that being said, I want to put out 2 ideas to you guys, and I hope that you respond with pictures of the bouquets or even inspiration that I have not included on what you love to cut or what works for you. I forgot to talk about this guy. So the challenges or the ideas that I'm going to throw out are two. And this is sea holly or eryngium. So this guy is not quite yet ready to bloom, and it turns this vibrant blue and kind of ghostly white on these fabulous little thistle flowers. I brought this in because it's usually in like every list of cut flower bouquet plants, but it's not super common that you see them at the garden center. Right now, of course, you need to come and snatch them up because as soon as they do turn their colors, they disappear and they'll be hard to get again. So sea holly or eryngium, this is a variety called blue glitter. Just got kind of a low clump of so attractive basal foliage. Then it just shoots up this flower spike that just begs to be cut and thrown into a bouquet. And it's going to be long lasting because it's more thistle-like than flower. So not much to fade away. Back to my challenge. Okay, two ideas. One is I would like to encourage you to try to cut a weekly bouquet. So this is, I'm throwing down the gauntlet to all of you class watchers, wherever you are, the Sunday bouquet. And the challenge to do your Sunday bouquet is head out in your slippers if you've got to. Go out early in the morning with a little bucket or pitcher. Cut yourself any size bouquet. It's, what makes a bouquet? Well, it's usually not a bouquet of one flower. I guess bouquets are, a few stems. So let's say it's at least 3 stems of something. Let's see your bouquets on our Facebook page. Tag us on Instagram, Sunday Bouquet. We would love to just see what you put together. I'll be doing the same and can possibly be posting some of my own. So I think that you'll find it's easier to do than you think. I'm not asking you to cut every flower you have. And remember, think small and make little mini bouquets, nosegays. Have tiny little arrangements at your on your guest bathroom counter and in the kitchen and in places where you want some color and that'll make you happy. Second idea beyond Sunday Bouquet challenge is as you get into really just like the flower season, summer annuals blooming, zinnias, I love zinnias, poppies, cosmos, snapdragons, the roses in bloom, all, lovely dahlias flowering. As you get into that season, another really fun way to use your cut flowers and extend your ability to enjoy them is to dry them. Now, I'm not talking about, getting out the family Bible and pressing them and putting them into any kind of funky frames or whatever. I mean, if you want to do that, that's super cool too. Drying flowers can be as simple as a low microwave with your hydrangea flowers, for example. On low for a couple of minutes, and you can actually dry up the last of the moisture in your hydrangea blooms and then have them last for months, if not a year, with that kind of faded beauty of summer color that they tend to get as they age. One of my favorite ways of drying flowers is actually drying them in sand. And it is a technique that I learned about a couple of years ago and have tried with varying degrees of success, and it depends on the flowers that you choose. And I find it's really fun to experiment regardless. So I use just a shallow flat box that's open on the top, just like a tray, kind of like a plant carry-out tray that you could get at a garden center when you buy things here. I kind of taped up the ends so that the sand doesn't come out the sides of the box. And then I fill that box that's maybe 2 inches with sand. Ideally it is clean, like builder sand, play sand, horticultural sand, something that's nice and clean. And then the flowers that you cut, you actually will lay into the sand something like a dahlia flower such as this. We would cut with maybe 1 inch of stem left, put it into the sand in a little depression, and then slowly add the sand back in around each of the layers of petals. So don't just pour sand in from, 18 inches away or whatever. You're gonna slowly cover it in sand, giving the petals the support to keep the flower actually somewhat shaped as it is. Completely cover that flower and the petals and leave it for up to 2 weeks before you very carefully excavate the flower from the sandbox. You will find that the flower is perfectly preserved. The color may have faded a hair, but the color tends to remain much better than if you dried them in the microwave or more of a traditional way. And I have some zinnias, for example, that I have preserved that way that are probably from 2 summers ago now. So still orange, still perky, and it's a great way to, again, I have some vases, I forget to add water, they dry out, and my plants die, and my cuts die. Those little vases are fun to put dried things and dried flowers in, so that I have bouquets in areas that last for months. With that being said, I really enjoyed this program with you today. I hope you did as well. I will answer any questions that didn't get addressed afterwards. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy gardening.